All right, guys, welcome everyone. Appreciate you joining us. What's today? What are we on? Thursday? Almost a Friday, so appreciate you joining this Thursday afternoon, morning for some. As you may have heard, it's being recorded, so I'll definitely pass around a recording of this webinar afterwards. It'll also be posted to our YouTube channel and on our website as usual, so if you want to access it that way, feel free. And also there's a Q&A box there, so we're going to talk about a few things today that we do with our clients. The methods that I talk about are certainly not the only way. So if you guys are doing something different in your firm, I always encourage you to chime in. Let me know what you're doing a little bit different. And I always bring that to the discussion so that we can talk about what other firms are doing. So I guess brings us to the topic. We have 20649 right around the corner with the SEC. And with that, there's going to be language of having a written risk assessment or a written threat assessment, which isn't surprising because, we've seen this in the language from the SEC before. And if you follow that document that I keep on the website where we keep all the ongoing requests that we've seen from the SEC, you'll see where they've requested this in the past. So just wanted to, talk about how we go through it, how we approach this type of risk and threat report with our clients and what we're looking at. I'll start at the 30,000-foot view and discuss the threat landscape and what it looks like specifically for SEC-registered firms, and then dive into specifics that you guys could use at your firm. So this is really one of my favorite webinars and topics to talk about, which is a great turnaround from our last one, which was policies and procedures, which really just, I tell you what, that can drive anyone into the ground. So my name is Brian Hahn. Since 2009, I've been consulting with SEC and FINRA registered institutions on cybersecurity and intelligence-related issues. Prior to Tradecraft, I've been in the COO and CCO roles of several SEC registered firms, and also did a little work at Ray Dalio's Bridgewater and CS Analytics. So I think one thing that's a little bit unique about how I consult with clients is that I'm completely unbiased. I don't partner with vendors, software, MSPs, anything of that nature. And that's important to know because, I talk about several techniques that I use, and I'm going to talk about several pieces of software that I use that I'm not affiliated with, just an end user. So again, I always love to hear if you guys are doing something different in your firm, and bring that to discussion. So I say, let's start with first, don't kill the consultant. All right, 20649 and all that it's going to bring. It's going to be very difficult for a lot of firms. It's going to be difficult for the firms that are small and don't have the cybersecurity resources or people in place. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be expensive. And even for larger firms who haven't been doing, kind of the basics that the SEC talked about before 20649, I think a lot of those regulations are going to be tough for firms to follow. So, we're going to talk today about how to build a report to the T. I try to be extremely thorough in my reports. So you can always take what, we're showing here and hopefully apply the same framework to your firm and how you're thinking about it. So, when I first start the consultation with a client, we really break it down and say, hey, look, we're really protecting two things: data and assets. For my clients that don't have custody or they only have technical custody per like manager billing, in other words, all their clients' assets are at Schwab or Fidelity or what have you, the job's a lot easier. For my hedge fund clients that are running proprietary trading apps and they're pulling assets at the end of a day into account and then allocating trades, a lot of times that can be more difficult because we have the possibility, to lose assets in a cyber attack. So, those are really the two things at the end of the day that we're trying to protect. And of course, we're trying to protect them across multiple fronts. We use data and we're interacting with our clients' assets when we're at the office, and then that data and those assets are at custodians and the brokers. And if you have an MSP, they have access to that data. And perhaps you have work from home policies now. So we have potentially sensitive data on home networks. So, even though it's two different things, it quickly spreads out when you consider the different fronts that we're dealing with. And so, I think one of the questions that often comes up is really what's the worst that can happen? What is the disaster that we're trying to prevent? So one of the things, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but one of the things that I do, just for our clients is I keep an internal database of breaches that I find. So when we're going out and doing the threat work for our client, we're looking at these past breaches and seeing if we can locate information within those breaches. Because if a hacker decides to come after your firm, the first thing they're going to do is try to locate this information. So we want to make sure that it doesn't get out there. Of course, one, so we're not attacked, and two, for the privacy of our clients, obviously. So I have a couple screenshots here that I've taken from one of the resources that we go to. This is a group known as Vice Society. This is a very professional ransomware group, unfortunately. You can see on the left is a screenshot of their homepage. They have a section for journalists that want to write about them. They've been written about quite a bit, so they'll comment on that. They have a blog where they'll also provide feedback, and also a website for their victims. So, their victims get ransomware. They're given a certain ransom that they need to pay in Bitcoin. And if they don't, those individual organizations are included in the Our Partners list, which you can see there at the bottom. Over on the right is just one of the samples of one of the many files that's available there. This one from, forgive me on this, Okanagan College. Just random college I took a screenshot of. I did the blurring on this photo. Down below, this is how the data is actually presented on the website. It's when you click on the View Documents link there, you'll literally be taken to a replica of that college's server. So you can find everything from past tests to the students' passport photos, which you see here, all student information. Literally everything that this college kept on their server is now available for public browsing. As you can imagine, these people will forever have identity theft issues because of the significant amount of information that was posted up there. And so this college didn't pay the ransom, and their information got posted. So literally, this is a big disaster, and this is ultimately what we are trying to prevent happening from the end of the day. We want to protect our clients' data because we are privy, in this world, in this industry, we are privy to a lot of sensitive information. So we want to make sure we're protecting that, and of course, also want to make sure we're not compromising systems in order that would cause asset losses. So there's really three different kinds of threats that we're dealing with. One are just random threats, like it's literally like a drive-by shooting and you're an accidental victim of these type of cyber attacks. There's also direct attacks where people are trying directly to get into your firm. They are targeting you. They're spending time. They're scoping out the situation. That's a direct attack. And then also your employees. Honestly, your employees are your biggest threat. We'll talk a little bit later about how people ultimately get in, but usually phishing is a big part of it. And that comes from untrained employees who don't know what to look for in an email or don't understand what a malicious website looks like. And ultimately, they're going to compromise your firm. And so, what is a random attack? I think people always have that idea. So a random attack, here you can see a picture of an individual. I don't forget his name, but he's known as the Nigerian Prince of Slidell, Louisiana. And this is an individual who took a large mailing list. I'm not sure, I'm sure tens of thousands deep, and sent out a literal Nigerian Prince email. Hey, I've got money tied up in Nigeria. my uncle's a prince under arrest. I need to send money out, send me $50 to show you're in and we'll share the profits. You guys all heard the typical stuff. And so this elderly gentleman was running that type of scheme. And this is a random attack. He was sending out just random emails, hoping that out of the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of emails that he's sending out, one of them would bounce back and take the bait. And another question I always hear is like, well, how likely is it that I would become a random? And to me, it's pretty likely. So let me pop up an example here. I want to show you one program or one website called Shodan.io. And Shodan.io is a Google-like search engine for devices that are connected to the internet. So if I go to Google and I type in financial blog or financial planning, it'll deliver blogs that are appropriate to that topic. If I go to Shodan and type in refrigerators, it'll show me all the refrigerators that are connected to the network. So this is a quick way to become a random individual. For instance, one of the biggest vulnerabilities I see in firms is remote desktop connection wide open and not being secure. And when you have employees like that, it becomes very easy to search them here. So to show you an example, I'll come up here and say, I don't know if uppercase matters, let's do, show me all systems connected that have port 3389 open, which port 3389 is the typical port that remote desktop connections open. So when I do that, it shows me there's over 3 million machines with that particular port open. We can see the distribution throughout the throughout the world. And down here, I'll click on remote desktop because I just want to see the machines that have remote desktop open to the world and then secure. So here it starts telling me the different machines, and I can even go over to browse images, and it will show me what the login screens of these machines look like. So it can get even juicier. Let's say we could try to say, show me everything that has port 3389 open and has the word finance somewhere on the desktop. And here we can see it brings back several different machines. We have Tim Walters. And so, if I had a particular vulnerability that could attack remote desktop, this is what I would do. I would go to Shodan and find all these individuals. And so what you're seeing right now is the front end of Shodan. On the back end, we can use a little bit of Python code to quickly query this database, download thousands of IP addresses, and start running our vulnerabilities across thousands of IP addresses to see where it sticks. So these are random attacks, and these are how individuals, for instance, firms that have remote desktop open and then secure, can become vulnerable. So if I see a couple clients in the audience here. Guys, this is why we're always talking about remote desktop, making sure that it's secure and closed, because these type of attacks do happen. And so what is a direct attack example? If you've been to some of our webinars, one of the most famous attacks that I talk about, and it kind of backs up too, and one of the things that we talk about with phishing is, in a random attack, phishing is going to be pretty generic, Nigerian prince attack type style. In a direct attack, they're going to come at you with something juicy. So one of the clients I worked with had a admin. The client was a trader, it was a small hedge fund, had an admin. The admin had access to the trading portfolio, the trading platform, because she would do the cashiering for the firm whenever there was a cash out or an RMD, whatever the firm needed. And this lady had posted up on Facebook that her husband was going out of town, going to, I believe it was a Marriott in Fort Lauderdale. and she gets an email and says, hey, your husband just went into a hotel room at the Fort Lauderdale Marriott. Do you know this girl? And there's a link in there. And of course, when you put someone in that type of situation, when you trick them with that, when that type of threat, their guards go down, and hopefully, they have training to overcome that and stop and think and look at the link. And think about what the attack may be. But, we're going to talk a little bit more about social media and how that plays into attack in a bit. And you can see how this unfolded. And it's pretty easy for it to unfold. But it's just one of those things, training goes a long way, because direct attacks are going to come at you. They're going to have scoped out your firm. They're going to know things about you from social media. They're going to know things about your systems that you don't even know. So, direct attacks can be pretty brutal. One of the things I always tell my clients too is, you can take the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, pretty much any of these three-letter agencies, and, potentially they have unlimited talent, unlimited access to networks, and essentially an unlimited budget compared to other enterprises. And yet they still find themselves victims of attacks. So, of direct attacks, of course. So, it's one of those things that you really have to, pay attention as much as you can, because when these type of individuals want to come in, it's pretty hard to repel them. And again, when they want to get in, when there is a direct attack, they're going to come after your employees. That really is your greatest threat. We have a product called Fieldcraft that we use for training our clients. It's available. In fact, we even have a free version, a free limited version of it. If you have less than 10 employees, it's absolutely free to get some training done, just because it is essential. I know the training is expensive for a lot of firms. So if you have under 10, we want to make sure there is some kind of option out there for you guys to get training. But check it out. It's really painless. It'll check all the boxes for the SEC, and let you get that checked off your task list for your firm. So when we talk about the threats and what we're trying to protect, I like to use this graphic. If we think about here in the center, we have our sensitive information, we have our money, we have our bars of gold, we have all this stuff that is sensitive to us. And around that, we want to make sure it's available. We want to make sure the integrity of those assets and information is there, and of course that it's confidential. And to do that, we are essentially protecting our communications, our hardware, and our software. And all that's, encased in physical security and the personal security and the organizational security. So there's all these different levels. And on the left are all the different types of attacks that we generally see when a client is threatened. And you'll see that, these don't exactly add up to 100%, and I'll show you why in a second. But for the most part, 71% of all attacks are going to have some aspect of phishing. And usually a successful attack is going to have one or two different vulnerabilities or social engineering that it takes for. So you can see the general breakdown on what these attacks look like. So when we're working with clients, we want to understand, what does their network look like? What does their infrastructure look like? What does this onion look like, so that we can look at it from a hacker's perspective and understand how we can better protect those assets. And here's a clear example. Did anyone get their Equifax settlement check? I believe we did. I think it was like $12 or something like that, right? It was supposed to be, I think, 120. I don't remember what the settlement was, but the actual payout ended up being a lot less. Quite a joke for actually how much damage was done. If you're not familiar with the Equifax breach, they essentially lost everything. Social security numbers, full credit history, account numbers. It was a pretty devastating breach. And here you can see how that breach occurred, or how that attack occurred. And these are the type of vectors, these are the type of angles when we do our threat assessment that we want to try to attack. So over on the left, you can see these are different vulnerabilities, and up on the top are different devices or apps or hosts that have sensitive information on the network. And with the Equifax attack, it started with an unpatched vulnerability in a server. That server was hosting a good bit of client data, I believe. That led to a misconfigured data storage unit, where they were able to access these client records. They then found shared passwords in the Active Directory, which allowed them to steal certificates for the intrusion protection and firewall systems, which ultimately led to a loss of customer data across a couple different applications. So there's always different attack vectors, right? These can go a bunch of different ways. This could have gone from a phishing attack to a misconfigured storage router, or a phishing attack to a wide open remote desktop. There's a lot of different ways that they can go. So I always like to show this chart. I think it gives a little bit better idea of how these different attacks happen. I know when the headlines come across in the news, sometimes it can be a little confusing to understand what really happened. So now that we kind of got a understanding of what we're trying to do, essentially we want to paint a threat map for our firm. We want to take the different attack vectors that are relevant to our firm and think about the different devices and apps and software that our firm and our employees are using to interact with the assets and the client data. And then we want to, start to map that and understand, okay, maybe certain CRMs on the cloud have too much data or they're not secure enough. You get the idea. Each map's going to be a little bit different for each firm. Some firms do very little handling of client data. Maybe they're just doing financial planning and they don't even collect social security numbers. They're just collecting names and arbitrary numbers into a system. So, and others are doing crypto trading, right? So those are going to have a much bigger threat vector. So these are all the types of things that we're trying to look at. So when we actually get started with the firm, with our clients, for us, one of the biggest steps is understanding what does a hacker see when they look at the firm. And so that process is we start to go through what's known as OSINT, or open source intelligence. The idea is that we want to understand what information is out there about your firm that is publicly available. Can I find usernames and passwords and insecure servers without even having to talk to your network, so that we know what to attack and how to plan it? So the open source search is always the first step. There's an awesome website called the Open Source Framework. Let me see if I have that up. I think I have the actual interactive website up. If you go to osintframework.com, you can interact with this. I just have a screenshot up there for the time being. But the idea is I start with a domain name. So when I'm working with a client, I take the domain name and I will run it through a bunch of these different search engines and start to learn things about who owns the firm, who registered the domain, what's the website looked like in the past. We can start to learn a lot about the domain. From there, we'll start to learn email addresses that are associated with those domains, and then we'll backwards search them into social media profiles. So we call this spidering, and we actually have a program here that I wrote using a little bit of Python code, where when we take a domain, we start with that and we spider it out. And we've demonstrated that in a couple of webinars, so I'm not going to pull it up and demonstrate it here, but you can certainly find those on the YouTube channel. But the idea is we call it spider because you're constantly pivoting. Once we find an email address, then we find a social media profile. Maybe we started with the work email and now we found the social media, and we were able to source a personal email, and then we found a spouse's email, and we spidered from there. We found a kid's email. We really want to learn as much as we can about those victims, so that when we go back to the client, we can say, hey, this is the information that's already out there. You have John Smith in trading, and we found his information in 20 different breaches, and in 20 different breaches, he uses password 123 as his password. We got to talk to John Smith about getting a stronger password, using two-factor authentication, that sort of thing. So this is really the first step to building the case. We're building the threat and risk map. Like I said, we use our own software here, but there is a, excuse me, I still got this up. And if you hear me pull that down, there is a publicly available software called Spiderfoot. And honestly, I'm not familiar with the cost of it. If I had to guess, it's probably over $1,000 a year for the software. That's a wild stab in the dark. Honestly, I don't know. I actually used a lot of the same tools that Spiderfoot is built on to build the one that we use personally, but Spiderfoot does it in a ready-to-go package. And this is the type of software that you can, put your domain in, and it'll start to build these connections for you so that you can go and look and see what public information is available about your firm. Once we do this, it's pretty easy to find PDFs that you've posted on the website and scrub the metadata from those PDFs to find usernames, misconfigured PDF applications, things of that nature. So Spiderfoot does an awesome job of that. I've seen it in action. I just don't know the pricing point on it. But if that's something you're interested in tackling in a do-it-yourself fashion, instead of going through that OSINT framework step by step, because that will be death by 1,000 razor blades. Again, don't kill the messenger here. It is what it is. There's a lot of information that you have to collect for these reports. So, finding an automated solution or hiring a third party to do it definitely makes sense for a lot of firms. So, okay, now we've done our search. We've started to collect some information. Now what? If you see my other webinars, I'm big on a piece of software called Maltego. You can get Maltego for about $1,000 a year with software for the software license. And it is amazing what it does for IT, for HR, for compliance. It's a graphical piece of software that allows us to organize a ton of data so that we can respond to SEC audits really fast. It's worth its weight in gold. Again, no affiliation to them. If you guys have a better solution out there, please let me know, because I pay full retail on this software just like you guys would. But here's a version of where we took Maltego and we took an email address, john.doe@gmail.com. And we ran it through our filters and said, hey, show us all the past breaches that John.doe was involved in. So you can see there was a breach, Apollo.io, Audi USA, so the car manufacturer. There's Adobe, Bonobos, which is a clothing maker. Usually we can find LinkedIn on here. Drizzly was a big one. Canva was another one. These are a lot of services that people use. And then down below that, I will map the different information I was able to collect about that individual. So their past employers, their date of birth, their phone number, their driver's license. Driver's licenses were a tough one. A lot of people used the Drizzly service over COVID break, whatever we call that period now, where you would have alcohol and food and things like that delivered to your house, and a lot of people would upload their driver's license to these apps so that they could have alcohol delivered. So if you used Drizzly, your license is probably out there for everyone to peruse. Social security numbers, social media profiles, vehicle details, what's their tag number, what's their car look like. We can get a lot of this from the park.io. Oh, this is from the Audi data. Also the park.io data, which runs a lot of the automated meters these days. It has a lot of juicy information out there. So, of course, usernames, passwords, and IP addresses. Passwords are going to be breached. It happens. We always use this just to reiterate the conversation of how important it is to have two-factor authentication, because if I now have John Doe's username, I have his password, I have an IP address for a server that he's using. I even know his password hints in case he changes them slightly. So that's a devastating attack, and without two-factor authentication, potentially I would get access to that server. But of course, if he does have two-factor authentication, that's still an obstacle that's going to be extremely difficult for me to overcome. And I always say two-factor authentication is one of the most important things you can have. There's really no excuse for not having it on any system today. The other thing we want to do is, there's open source intelligence, and we also want to understand our internal intelligence. What does our network already look like? We're inside the network already. We already have privileged access. So let's go ahead and scan this thing. Let's walk around the inside of the fort with a flashlight and see what holes are coming through the fort gate, through the exterior. And so one of the products that we use is called Nessus, Nessus. This is an expensive one. This one runs about $4,000 a year. So please, again, if you have a better solution for your firm, let me know. But Nessus is really awesome. It handles everything that we need to know. Essentially, I want to know what's on my internal network. Are my VoIP phones updated? Are all my Windows machines patched and updated? Does everyone have remote desktop connection closed? Does everyone have secure certificates on their VPN connections? Do they have VPN connections open? These are all the kinds of answers we want to know about our network so that we can determine if there's any insecurities or vulnerabilities that we need to address. So Nessus does an amazing job of that, both externally for things like websites, email servers, client portals, and internally, Windows machines, mobile devices, VoIP phones, whatever may be on those internal networks. So Nessus is always my go-to. There are, I know there's several other solutions out there. Some of them work very well. We've always just gone with Nessus because, believe it or not, it's one of the lower price points out there. So, but it does the job. It does a really good job of tackling just about everything. I think we're over 200 pen tests now. I think we're slightly over 200 pen tests now. I've never found a client that I could not deploy Nessus in for a complete solution. So it really is a Swiss Army knife. And when you deploy Nessus, it allows us to build graphs like this and work to secure our network. So this is an internal scan of a firm. So each line represents a different device that was located on that network. And then we can see the scale of vulnerabilities here. If I click on the vulnerabilities tab up here at the top, it'll give me details of each vulnerability, written solutions, screenshots of where it found that vulnerability, and that sort of thing. So what I usually do when I'm working with clients is I will take the data out of Nessus, and of course we produce our reports and can run off this. But one of the things that I like to do is, again, import it back into that Maltego file. Here's an example at the top that we imported, an audit of the Dunder Mifflin Company in Scranton. We audited 2 IP addresses. One is the scanner.dundermifflin.local address, and the other one is the pam.dundermifflin.local address. And on Pam's machine, we found a SSL certificate that was insecure. So we have that marked with a time bomb. I like to put this in Maltego. For one, it gives us a graphical map. We know what the system is connected to, what it's possibly related to. And if I'm working with an IT team, it allows me to collaborate with them to make sure that this gets fixed. This will allow me to collect my notes on it getting fixed. So again, when we come to those SEC examinations, Maltego allows us to quickly print out a report and say, hey, we found a vulnerability. IT addressed it 2 days later. Here's a rescan through Nessus. You can see that vulnerability has been taken care of. So 20649, as it looks, is going to mandate doing a vulnerability scan or a penetration test at least once annually. For firms that want to do it yourself and go through and install a Nessus system, you can have them running once a day, once a week, something like that if you want, and sending reports to you in an automated fashion. So Nessus is great about putting that type of information together. And essentially what it's doing is scanning the network and just looking through a database of known vulnerabilities. And everything that I've researched says Nessus has the kind of the best database on that. So again, one of the reasons that I went with that. Two, we also, here's an example of a past RIA that I was involved with in the secure portal of it. And what we did is basically scanned it with Nessus. This is a scan of the secure portal, and it tells me all the information I need to know about that portal. So, doing it this way, it handles quite a few things for us on a compliance checkpoint wise and an operations point wise. One, this gives me a lot of information in one report. So even if I don't have vulnerabilities currently, having all this information in one report or in one location like Maltego gives me the quick ability to search for any new threats or vulnerabilities that might have come up. So I think it was roughly 6 months ago, the Log4j vulnerability started hitting the news. So it would have been very easy, a matter of less than 60 seconds to jump into Maltego, search for Java or Log4j, and see if you have any systems that had these type of operations going on with them. So again, it's all part of, kind of one, doing the initial threat assessment, addressing those vulnerabilities, but also keeping all of that information updated in your threat assessment so that, when new threats are identified, and as a side note, definitely sign up for the CISA emails that come out once a week about all new vulnerabilities. It takes 20 seconds to scan through those, read through the system, see if you have any of those systems, in your network. And if you're not sure, you can pop open the Maltego graph and do a quick search, and it'll tell you. But that's a great way to just consistently do ongoing threat management and document it for the SEC to show them that we're doing it. Because, we all know if you don't document it, it didn't happen. And side note on the 20649, there is going to be language about record keeping, and the language is a must keep for 5 years. And one of those is a written risk and threat assessment. So just a heads up on that, it is going to be one of those things that's probably going to be standard request when they come in, hey, give us all your written risk and threat assessment for the past 5 years, because that's going to be outlined in the language as it sits now. So 20649 hadn't been finalized. We're still waiting on some of the final language there, but as it looks now, there's going to be a 5-year record keeping on this. That's it, guys. I hope that kind of gives you an overview of how we approach the risk and threats with our client, and talk to them about what they need to be doing to, get their network in good shape, and then also apply proactive approaches. So, again, we use some software. If you want to do the open source intelligence type stuff in your firm, I'd recommend taking a look at Spiderfoot. That's one that can do those type of analysis for you and collect that type of mass data so that you can sort through it and see what's a threat, what's relevant. We also talked about Nessus, which I use to scan networks internally and externally. Software runs about $4,000 a year, unfortunately. I believe there may be some lower price tiers on there for, if you only need to scan 10 or 15 IP addresses or something of that nature. So, definitely don't take my word on that. Go take a look for yourself with Nessus. And then also Maltego, Maltego is the other piece of software that we talked about using. And really, I take these three kind of pieces, the open source intelligence piece and Maltego and Nessus, and that is pretty much the tools that I use to go through and create a pretty thorough risk assessment. So, if you guys are interested in having that performed for your firm, definitely reach out to me. We can jump on a screen share and I can show you some examples of what real world reports look like for firms and potentially what it would look like for your firm. Any questions, please feel free to toss them up in the Q&A there. Certainly happy to tackle those and address any questions you have. I do have one question. Do I provide certificates of attendance for CPEs? So unfortunately, not at this moment. We're in an awkward place with the NASAA right now in getting registered. So we are a certified educator to provide continuing education credits, but unfortunately, the firm has been approved, but our coursework has not been approved yet. So unfortunately, I don't quite have a certificate to go out and give. So another question is, how do we incorporate dark web searches? So that's a great question. It's tough. It's really not easy. For me, it's watching these different hacker boards and breacher boards and seeing what data comes available on there and what's interesting. I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for information, of course, directly related to my clients or potential clients. If I see a firm come up in these boards, we're definitely going to reach out to make contact to let them know what happened. But also just relevant information. If I have clients who work with a lot of AT&T clients, we see an AT&T breach, we'll definitely kind of watch that. So I like to keep a personal watch on the pulse on what breaches are coming out. There's a couple key forums that you can watch and see what's hot out there. There are other sources. I do believe that Spiderfoot source that I talked about, I do believe they have a built-in dark web type search aspect. Again, it just gets tough, and it even gets tough with some firms because what you find on the dark web, you can't always pin to actionable data. I'll give you an example. If we do a search for a CEO named John Smith, right? That spidering is going to go out and find dark web accounts on horrendous websites with horrendous content on it because someone registered as John Smith. And so, you really have to go through and source a lot of it and think about it. Hey, is this really a website John Smith would be visiting? Probably not, right? And so even a lot of the data that you collect can be difficult to sort through with the dark web just because it's just not organized. It's in a mass manner, that type of thing. So yeah, it's something I do. It's something I think like Spiderfoot does. But even the data that you get from there is just not always actionable. Now it's certainly, it's more actionable when you're using it to confirm a situation than it is to discover a situation, if that makes sense. So, it's always useful when doing a backwards threat assessment, or how did this happen, or how did our data get out there? It's definitely useful in that point. One question is, in terms of written risk assessment, are there any additional risk assessment paperwork that we need to prepare? Yeah, that's a great question. So I like to do the written threat assessment. I usually do just kind of a graphical print of everything I put in Maltego. From Maltego, I can do a PDF from that. So I'll produce a PDF of all that report. I also do certifications for the cybersecurity awareness training. So I think most platforms are like it, but if you're in our platform, it takes about 10 minutes to set up. You have your employees in there, they'll be assigned training, and then the system will track their training as they go. I usually don't print reports out of that. I usually just let the system, or tell our clients to let the system collect that data. And then in the event of an audit, or we're doing the annual review, we'll go in and print the PDF reports to show the cybersecurity awareness training. So I like to have that. There's the threat assessment, there's the cybersecurity awareness training. I also like to do network and domain maps. You'll see the SEC request that a lot. So I like to make a graphical map, just a very clean map of how is everything connected? What domains do we own? Are there email servers on those domains? Are there web servers on those domains? How many offices do we have? How many Apple computers are in each office, and make a graphical map of that. So to me, I kind of consider that a risk assessment, just, so that we can show, hey, we understand the network. We understand what's connected. We understand what services we purchased, what cloud vendors we're using, et cetera. I think another risk assessment, and I didn't really touch on it in this webinar, ultimately, because I think it's a topic unto itself, but your vendor due diligence and what you're doing for that, I think is something that needs to be written. And that's a difficult one too. We've had some templates that we use to go out and request that from vendors, but there's really not a great source that I know of. At one point, I forget the name of the firm. It'll come to me in a minute. There was one firm that had a solution out there that would do the vendor due diligence for you. I apologize, it'll come to me. But there are some firms out there, I think, that have automated the vendor due diligence process. For me, when I'm doing a vendor due diligence for our clients, it's we're doing our own proprietary thing. But I think there are some things out there that you can purchase to go through and do that. So, definitely, for the ones like the Office 365, where you may have personal data, that type of data is pretty easy to collect. I think the ones we usually experience most difficult with are the smaller MSPs or smaller IT shops. So I like to get that type of information from them as well. Risk assessments, cybersecurity, SOC audits, whatever they may have. I like to collect that to show in my risk assessment as well. Can you kindly restate the newsletter that sends weekly vulnerability updates? Absolutely, I can. So it's called CISA, C-I-S-A. I believe, let me pull this up here. I believe the website for that is cisa.gov. Let me confirm that. cisa.gov. I'm sure if you scroll down here, you'll see a sign up for newsletter there. Or you could sign up for the tweets, probably going to be the same thing. But this is a government agency. They generally put out once a week. They'll rank them by severity, and the newsletter is just a very clean, simple newsletter that comes out. You're not going to get spam from it or anything like that, which is awesome. But yeah, these guys are going to be the ones that are the first to report vulnerabilities and put them out there. So this is always a great source to watch. All right. That's all the questions we have in there today, guys. I really appreciate you joining me. Of course, any questions come up afterwards, or you'd like to see a screenshot of different reports or interactive stuff like that, definitely let me know. Or if you have any questions about your firm, always love to chat cybersecurity. So just set up some time for us to talk. Again, I definitely appreciate you joining us, and hope you have a great day.